Deadlines are a fundamental part of working in business. Are you one of those people like a baseball player running for the home run and you slide in on the last base just as the umpire says, yep, you're home? My name is Darren and you're at the home of Sticky Learning, MBM, trainers to the UK grocery industry and experts in making learning stick. Today I'd like to talk with you about deadlines. A lot of people are one of those baseball players that just slide in and get the home run. And you might say, what's wrong with that? I'd say nothing except the stress that it causes. And then people will say to me, but I do my best work under pressure. I'd say the research disagrees. In fact, when we're stressed, scientists have proved that our IQ drops to that of a teenager. So when the adrenaline is running, when the cortisol is going around our body, what's happening is we're getting ready for fight or flight for the saber-toothed tiger. But of course, they don't exist anymore. What happens at work is when we really need to be our best, make our best decisions, what's happening is our IQ has dropped. So you think that you do your best work under pressure. It's not true. What happens is you get very stressed under pressure and you seem to get a lot done. But let's look at that a whole different way. Lots of people slide in, getting their deadlines done just on time. A bit like when they go for a train and they're almost proud to jump on the train having run across the platform as the doors are bleeping. I made it. And yes, you did. But let's look at the stress that caused, and was it really worth it? There is an alternative. And it's not going to be an alternative that you'll want to embrace because part of you really likes the roller coaster ride of that adrenaline rush. But here's my challenge. You've got a manager who is erratic, disorganised, sliding in at last base just to get the deadlines done. And whilst that's quite exciting, is that really the person that you would want to work for? Would you prefer someone that's more measured, knows what they're trying to achieve, let's call it strategic thinking, and has a really good understanding of what the plan looks like for the next 12 months or the next few days, but isn't trying to hit deadlines just as they happened or passed? That's exciting, but the stress is huge. And multiply that as a cascade from top to bottom in a company. The guy at the top is working on a last minute deadline because he couldn't think further ahead than a few weeks. That cascades to the next level down, the next level down, and by the time it gets to middle management or below, they're running around like headless chickens, stressed, making decisions at last minute on something that's probably pretty important for that company. This would not be the image that I suggest you want to portray. So let's look at why. Why do people just hit or just miss their deadlines? Why not turn in a report a few days before? Well, the reason is they don't trust themselves. Let me say that again. The reason is they don't trust themselves. Because let's imagine a scenario. You've got to write a presentation for a customer in 2 weeks' time, Thursday by 5 o'clock. The meeting happens on Friday at 9 a.m. Now you've had this for a couple of weeks and you're very busy, so you're working on emails and voicemails and meetings and all those other things that you've got to do. So you put it off and put it off. And then what happens is you get to Thursday, you know this thing's got to be done and you want to work on it, but you've been taken off to this meeting or that meeting, or this sudden idea has come in that you've got to work on, or this project. So you stay late on Thursday. You've missed your own deadline, but you'll stay late. and now you're working your own time. You've had a really long day, probably a 9-10 hour day, and what's happening is you're trying to do your very best work when you're most tired, when you have least energy. And that can't be good. It's an important customer meeting, yet you're not giving it the energy that you should because you were busy. Now, the reason you do that, and you probably have a late night or pull an all-night or into Friday morning, is because if you had started that piece of work, which let's say took 6 hours, if you had started it on the Monday previous, you would have finished the piece of work 6 hours later. But here's what happens next. You start to tinker. You start to play with the font. You start to look at the images. You start to have some great ideas about other things that you could do to make it really, really powerful. And they're great. That is the reason why you don't trust yourself to do it beforehand. And almost subconsciously, your mind has worked out that if you do start it Thursday at 7 p.m. and you pull an all-nighter, you're constrained by the deadline of the meeting the next day, so you can't tinker with it. The deadline's a hard deadline. What about if you could start it before? If you could trust yourself to only work the 6 hours, or let's say a 7th hour, the last hour being something really fabulous because you've got the time. What you would end up with is a perception by others that you're organised, you know what you're doing, you're not a stress head, a lot less stress for you, and maybe you've just added that little something extra to that presentation because you had a little bit more time, not playing with the font or the images because they're not overly important, but there's one idea, this maybe this role play that you did with another colleague to make sure that your messages came across, because presenting shouldn't just be about the slides, it should be about how you present, what body language you use, what tone you use. Anticipating the questions is more important than just the content. So, moving from being lastminute.com because it's very stressful and you are perceived to be disorganized and not really know what's going on, yet you're sliding in on the home run, feels great. I'm suggesting that there's a better way to do it. And that is to trust yourself. To trust yourself and become aware that if there is a deadline, you will start the piece of work way before the deadline. And you will commit to yourself not to tinker with it, but only to work on really great ideas that help dramatically improve, in this case, the presentation. If you do that, you will find that you start pieces of work earlier, you can get more done, you're more productive because you're using a higher IQ, it's less stressful, and you will rise up the ranks quicker because you are perceived to be someone who gets things done calmly, organised, and with an edge that makes your presentations, in this case, even more effective. So this is me leaving you with a challenge. Don't be a stress head. Don't slide in like the exciting baseball player because you like the roller coaster. Instead, do what we encourage you to do, which is a term called get the hairs running. Get the hairs running is about, I've got a presentation to do in 2 weeks. I need to get some data. That's the bit that's going to take the most time. So I'm going to get the hair running, just like the hair at a greyhound race. And I'm going to ask Bob to get me the data for 3 days' time. That way you can begin the presentation with the data in 3 days' time. Give yourself a deadline of, I'm going to do it all of this day and then I will stop because I haven't had any other great ideas and the font is fine and the images are great. And then leave it alone. And trust yourself that you can leave it alone. And then move on with another piece of work, knowing that piece of work is ready to go when you pick it up on the Friday. So get the hairs running and don't be lastminute.com. Thank you.